Welcome to Sexual Alchemy with Dea Carr. I'm here with my dear friend, Julia Rose, the founder of VaGenie. She is an actress, an entrepreneur, and an advocate of women's health and technology CEO.
Yes, I am.
Many titles: mother of two, wife of the fabulous artist Kinski,
Yes.
goddess extraordinaire, many titles. Yes, I will keep going. But
Yes. No, I'm not stopping you.
yes. Welcome, Julia.
Oh, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited you're doing this. You have no idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's so exciting for me to get to talk to the women in my life that I am fortunate to know, who are the trailblazers of healing the sacral chakra, right? Of healing our energy and our ideas, and unfortunately a lot of our illness around all things sexual and all things sacral based, the second chakra.
Yeah.
So would you talk to us a little bit about what VaGenie is and the origins of it, the genesis, what inspired it, and how it came to be, if you would?
I love that. Even as you're saying that and you're saying the genesis, I think it's so powerful because that is what I think of in terms of women's reproductive power is all about genesis.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's so wonderful that that's the word you use. But yeah, so the VaGenie is, wow, I really just fell into creating this product, and now it's so amazing how much it's touched my life and what an impact it's had on me personally. And I am really in awe of the places life brings us. So so quickly, basically I have two little guys. One of them, the older one, was born in France, and I found out that after a woman gives birth in France, every woman is entitled to a postpartum pelvic muscle rehabilitation of sorts program that is sponsored by their nationalized healthcare. It's free to every woman. And
Amazing.
It is, and
Amazing.
it gets even more amazing when you hear exactly what it is.
Yes,
And so basically what I did was I showed up at my midwife's office, and she, had this little device, and she put it in my body, and it connected to a big monitor, and she flips on the monitor, and she's like, "All right, have fun." And I'm looking at her like, "Wait, what?" And
There's no preamble. It was just
not really, like in the way I remember it. I
Yeah.
mean, who knows? But like the way I remember it is all of a sudden I'm looking at this screen, and I'm essentially doing Kegels to control a video game, which was, I have to be quite honest, at first kind of shocking, because I was like, oh my god, this vagina video games, what am I doing? And then I was
vagina
like,
video game.
right?
Yeah.
And then amazing, because I was thinking, I was so involved in it. I was playing these games for half an hour, which, by the way, first of all, I've barely done a Kegel in my life until then. And secondly, I'm looking at, I'm sitting in this room, like not wanting to leave. And so I thought it was amazing. And I just remember having the thought at some point, like, oh, so this is why French women are so darn confident, And I'm like, God, of course. Anyway, so then I came back to California, had another child. And as we know, it's a very different thing here in California. There was no vagina video games or any sort of care to my recovery afterwards. And so I remember the time after talking to friends here and there, I believe actually you were around, maybe we were having a baby no, I don't remember. But anyway, thinking like, why can't every woman have this kind of care, and how hard can it be? I mean, it's really just a Fitbit for the lady bits.
I love that.
Oh, I have so many by now. I've been doing this long enough.
VaGenie, by the way, is great.
You like that one?
Great name.
My CEO, Heather, she loves the one that says, look, everyone says find a niche and fill it. That's what we're doing. So we decided, I just was very lucky. I found an amazing team and we started creating this product. And what it essentially is a modern version of what I did in France. It's a device, goes in your body, connects via Bluetooth to your smartphone, and we have you playing video games that help teach you how to do your Kegels correctly, because most of us don't know how to do it. I don't care if you think you do.
Okay.
You may, because you are a yoga teacher, and I have a feeling there's a little extra training going on there. And we make it fun, because the other problem with Kegels is they're super boring, and we space out and we don't do them.
Right.
Now, the reason we do this is both to prevent all sorts of problems that can happen, which we can touch on, because they absolutely connect to our sexual responsiveness, but also to be healthier, be happier, and quite frankly, have a better sex life. So there you go.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And how many people do you, like, if you ever take a poll, like, okay, so now that we've talked about Kegels, like how many of you are now doing them?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Around the room.
Everyone,
You just see a
right?
lot of faces
Yeah,
kind of
like
twitching a little
yeah.
bit.
It's such an important discussion, and I think that I would imagine that you have to get past a lot of embarrassment at first, right? That even talking about, it wasn't until I would, like Eve Ensler, right? Like the vagina monologues, that suddenly we could say the word vagina without cringing, right? That it became much more in the popular vernacular rather than slang terms for female genitalia, right? So if we could own that word, VaGenie, right? I would imagine some people get a little blushy and get a little uncomfortable with that. Were you in situations, and I would imagine you had to be, where this was a bold, I mean, this is bold to come out as a woman and say, I'm doing this, and we're going to talk about your most intimate parts, and here we go.
I mean, 100%.
Yeah.
First of all, I will back up and say that I realize now that I may never have said the word vagina before I started doing this, which is in itself amazing, because I wasn't brought up extra religious. I wasn't, I mean, I think, we've talked about this before. I found myself at the crossroads of being someone who's, I'm worldly, and I'm well traveled, and I'm educated, and blah, 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 blah. And not to say that you wouldn't if you didn't, that sounds weird, but you know what I mean. Like I'd never said really the word vagina. I think I'd always used, little slang names or colloquialisms.
Sure.
That word I can never quite say. So yes, I would say first step was, for me, it was really interesting. And then secondly, I knew that this kind of product, when our biggest challenge was going to be the conversation. Because we can get into the need, and I absolutely believe now more than ever that every adult woman, should be aware of this part of her body and take care of it. And it's so important for so many reasons, and for a lot of reasons I hope we get into in this conversation, that traditionally has not happened. But that is why we picked the name VaGenie, and quite frankly, I go in to pitch it, and I've to this day still have some advisors and people who are saying, are you sure you want to stick with VaGenie?
Which is just reinforcing yes.
And I'm like, look, we can have this conversation at some point, but I'm telling you right now that the name is so important, not just because it's kind of cheeky and fun, but because I do want to help with this normalization of women's bodies.
Yes.
It's important.
Well, and then going to, like, what is the collective why were we so uncomfortable with that word? There is a bigger misogyny behind that, right? That we are taught that the female body is shameful, that the female body is hidden and needs to be, something we're uncomfortable with. And so whatever level that we learned that collectively, there has to be a dismantling. And so, like you said, to be able to say the word without shame, to be able to boldly name your product, something so perfect like that is a big step, and it's important.
It is, and it's a big part of just other things I've noticed as I've been doing this product is like how much education I needed about my own body, especially in the vagina, the vulva, the clitoris. Hello, I had no idea, by the way, until very recently, I am a grown woman, what the clitoris really looked like and how big of an organ it really is. I always imagined
this is huge, and anyone who doesn't know this, by the way, look it up. I invite everybody
Google
to
it
look it up
right now.
Learn about your own body.
It's this incredible organ that wraps all the way internally. And by the way, once I really understood what that was, I understood my body and my sexual response so much better, because there's other things you feel and you're like, oh, that's so funny, I wonder why I feel that way. And now I understand why it doesn't have to all zone in on the tip of the clitoris. There's a lot we can do around that. Did we want to go down this road?
Yes, we do. All about we 100% want to go down this road. Absolutely. Because, and that's something to echo a conversation we were having with Alice, just getting into the places that have been in darkness. That is what this podcast is about. We are talking about the sacral chakra. We're talking about the very intimate parts about sexuality, but also the bigger picture of it all. The necessity of bringing to light all the things that have been in darkness, the things that have been suppressed, the things that have been denied, and the pain that happens collectively and individually when we feel shame, when we are stuck in our sacral chakra, when we've been abused, when we don't have proper sexual health, and ways that you're talking about, our sexual response is more activated, we're more aware, we have less shame, we have the ability to heal ourselves postpartum. That's essential. I mean, talk about, if you would, statistically, how many women have incontinence later in life, right? I mean, so many women I know are like, I can't get on a trampoline anymore, so much for jumping up and down, right? All those ways that we end up being limited because we don't have the proper common sense postnatal care, right?
Yeah. I think it's all of that stuff is so important. I love what you're saying about shedding light on this part of our body, because it is in shadow, and I think has been kept very secretive, not just out in society, but personally, internally. It's been something we've all been taught to be completely disengaged from. Mm-hmm. And one thing I've noticed, I do a lot of events around my product for educational purposes, and I've learned so much from the women who've participated, and I'm so grateful. But the biggest thing you notice is that, and this goes across, I've done them all over the country with all different types of people, and I've noticed that there's this complete unawareness that we're so completely disattached. Yeah. Because we have taken, it's so normal, and we've learned to express our feminine in other ways. Maybe we, make sure our hair looks nice, or we dress a certain way, or whatever it is. And I think sometimes a lot of the reasons we're not rooted is because and I don't know why this makes me a little emotional even to talk about this, but it's because we have been ignoring our most fundamental physical identity. And it's been really interesting for me personally to learn about it, learn about how it affects other women, and to also see how I've been doing exactly the same thing, and how it manifests in so many ways beyond the physical. Mm-hmm. Certainly, like you're saying, I think the spiritual energy in us is shut down as well. Mm-hmm. And I think emotionally we can't fully embrace who we are without starting with something so fundamental. And that's actually why I love Kundalini Yoga, because it does activate the energy in all our sacral portals, and specifically always starts down at the sacrum. Yeah. And it's funny, in the business world, I don't actually delve into the spiritual as much, but I can't wait to be out there and be a company that's up and running, because I am sure that will be part of the conversation.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because it leads there, because it starts there. Yeah. And to your point, if I may, about the French women being so powerful, right? That the idea that once you're centered in your creative center, you spiritually come from this great confidence, because that is what we are. We are the divine mothers. We are the sacred feminine. And the more confident and stable we are in that chakra, the more able we are to express that collectively.
100%. And then you asked me, what's the statistic, incidence of incontinence and things like that. Yeah. I think what's really interesting is it's incredibly high. 2 out of 3 women will have weak pelvic floor muscles, and we'll get into more of that in a minute. And out of that, at least 1/3 will have incontinence. But other problems such as prolapse, which is when one of the organs that your pelvic floor muscles support, so that can be in women, your bladder, your uterus, your rectum, can start falling out of your body. By the way, it happens to over 1 in 10 women who give birth vaginally. We don't talk about it. Doctors don't even make a big fuss about it. They're like, oh yes, you have an organ starting to fall out, but let's wait till it's really serious and we'll just do surgery. So the incidence—
That is truly shocking.
It's shocking. The incidence of surgery for women right now is 1 in 5 for issues of incontinence and prolapse. 1 in 5 statistically are getting surgery, invasive surgery, that, by the way, doesn't always work the first time. 30% of them go back for additional surgery. And a lot of this could be addressed just by being aware of our bodies and understanding them, and knowing that there's, healthy, wanting to have healthy tissue down there, healthy muscle tissue, and finding a way to exercise it. And that's the physical side of it. Embracing it emotionally, embracing our feminine emotionally.
That's so big. And also it's bringing to mind like all the ways that we've been taught by kind of consumerism to be ashamed of the feminine, right? Douches, odors, for example. Talcum powder. Look at what is now coming out about talcum powder. That is now one of the probable causes of ovarian cancer. And yet, because women were taught that they had to, be odorless and dry and all the opposites of what the feminine yoni is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so shifting that conversation to hands-on, actual result-based healthcare is so essential, and it's so important what you're doing. And I'm so excited about the idea that not only what this is going to do, but hopefully what the ripple effect will be of it as well. Because I'm sure you're experiencing that to some degree just by virtue of the conversations you're having, right?
There's certainly, it gets me very excited when there's not just an awareness level that is opened, but for example, some of the women who test our products will say things like, it's so funny. I've been doing the exercises and it's great and I'm excited about it, but there's just, I think I've had some scar tissue down there since my second birth that I really haven't dealt with, and it does cause a little pain when I have sex, but I've sort of been ignoring it, so now I might take care of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's a pretty cut and dry, obvious, example. There's also much more subtle ones, which is quite frankly, it goes back to what we were talking about before a little bit, which is I'm just going to acknowledge that I have a vulva, a vagina, that I have sexual organs, and that I am a woman, and that I'm responsive. So one other benefit, by the way, of doing Kegels regularly and doing them often is it gets blood flow going down there. You have stronger, healthier muscles. But I've been testing a lot of products in the last year around this sort of thing, and I have to say it's really interesting because you actually end up owning your sexuality in a very exciting new way, because you can almost learn, for example, just to give you one example, how to bring yourself to orgasm just from doing these kinds of exercises. When you're engaging those muscles, it makes sense if you think about it, right? They're all down there around our responsive tissue, which is the clitoris and so on. And you can learn to, just like any other muscle, the stronger and healthy it is, the more agile it is, the more control one can have over it. And you start realizing, you're like, oh, I can sit here in my car and not even touch myself and kind of get things going.
Superpowers.
I have superpowers, and I say that's even more exciting to me than what a lot of people will talk about, which is how you can stimulate a partner, which of course is great too, because we all know that it's all about that healthy flow of back and forth if you're with your partner. But I think it's so interesting that you also have so much more power over your own responsiveness.
Truly. And what makes for a better sexual union than for mutual pleasure, right? So if we're it's for a woman to be empowered in her own sexuality and understand her own body, there's nothing sexier.
Oh, you're exactly right. Understand your own body. I mean, I can't believe, again, as a grown adult, who I feel like, has been open to learning about my body my whole life, still am in awe of how much I didn't know and probably don't know and still will learn. On all levels, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual. It's really interesting.
And how powerful, pussy power, right? How powerful the vagina is, right? What is that famous quote? I don't know if it's actually Betty White, but it's attributed to Betty White, that why do we say have some balls? She says we should say have some vagina, because nothing takes a pounding better than a vagina.
Yeah, exactly.
It's truly
I always
we have
had
this
issue with
mischaracterization.
And why is it being a pussy? You think about you're
all
such
the
a
ways
pussy,
that we,
and you're going, yes, I am. Thank you.
That we accept that too as being weak and being a negative. And that is part of our collective misogyny that we have to start to look at and start to disassemble, because there are ways that, again, it's the programming that we aren't even aware that we're subject to. And that's something that in my teaching Kundalini Yoga and being the life coach, I really try to help activate in people, because so much of it is subconscious, right? And until we start deeply,
because we know what we know, and we think we're aware, and we think we understand, and even someone who feels like they're someone who's open to learning and awareness, yes, it always rocks your world a little when you have these subtle shifts of perspective where all of a sudden you're going, oh, wait a minute, what? And that's me who thought that way before.
Right.
And I think this is such a beautiful time for all the insanity that's going on right now. I think the silver lining is this explosion of, or it's just almost like a hunger for awareness that women are having.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to change the world. for the better.
Yeah, and certainly it's unsettling to a lot of people who don't want the paradigm shift, that don't want the pulling of the threads that's going to unravel an entire system. But what's essential about, and we were talking about the Me Too movement, right? That we've suddenly collectively had this aha, like, wait, so that happened to you too, and that happened to you too, and that happened to me, and that happened to her, and all saying, it's actually not okay, the sexual harassment. It's not okay that we have to be put in situations over and over and over again of toxic masculinity. And one thing I really want to stress on this podcast as much as possible is not only when we're healing the feminine, when we're healing the divine feminine, we are healing the divine masculine. We are inviting them into a space of new consciousness that will only benefit them. And so in terms of, being more sexually responsive, being better lovers to ourselves, we can invite our lovers and our partners into better union.
I think that's so powerful, and there's two things you said I want to pick up on, and the first one is about giving voice to, like, when you give voice to something you become aware of, it's so powerful because, like you said, so many other people, and in this case women, will all of a sudden realize that, oh wait, it didn't just happen to me, so this must be a thing, so this is important, so I'm going to pay attention to it, and I'm going to grow.
Right.
And whether it's Me Too or, like in my events, it's usually about pelvic health, and someone will be like, oh my god, I pee my pants every time I do downward dog, and then the rest of them is like, wait, you do too? Oh my gosh, that happened to me, I thought it was just me.
And I felt so embarrassed.
Yeah, and you're embarrassed, and then I think my doctor thinks I smell like pee, and blah, blah, blah. So I think that's really powerful. And the other thing is so important is you're right, it doesn't just heal the feminine, it heals the masculine. And I have to say, it's been so interesting having I'm hawking a vagina product right now. I have to go raise money. Guess who I have to go raise money from for the most part?
Yeah,
the dudes.
The dudes.
And it's been really interesting because so many people will say to me, well, maybe you should just be talking to female investors. And this is more just of an observation. I have to say that for the most part, I think when you come in talking about a product like mine to men, and in my case, it's typically men in their 30s and 40s. I don't go much older than that. They seem to be wanting to find a way to be open to what we're doing.
Okay.
At least to my face. I have heard that they freak out a little once I read them. But to my face, they try. So to that, I just want to say thank you to all you men who are trying, because it is really appreciated. On another level, thank you also to all the husbands who I speak to who are like, oh my gosh, my wife's had 2 children. I know what you're talking about. I totally want to get this, thing for her and help her. And that just that warms
it's beautiful.
me.
Yeah.
And that, I think, just by the fact that their wives are sharing the stories with their husbands, you see, it gives them the opportunity to have empathy and be understanding and help out and shift that a little bit, right?
And that's, I will say, it seems to me almost a generational shift too, because I don't think probably women were having that conversation with their husbands in the 1950s.
No, I don't think they were having it in the 80s or 90s.
Yes.
I don't. Yeah.
Right. And so that the good thing about that, it indicates to me, is that we're much more in a partnership of that, like, I do better when you do better.
It's moving that way, and I really believe it is, and I think it's beautiful, and I really get touched by that. The other interesting thing is when I speak to women, one-on-one, not when I'm doing my group events and there's a bit of a community and a support, and if you're someone who really doesn't want to speak, you don't have to. But when I'm speaking to women one-on-one, I've realized that this kind of for people who think it's much easier to talk to women, I just want to say this, it's not. Because we are so emotionally connected to our pelvic area, as we're talking about.
Yeah.
And you just don't know what a woman's history is. You don't know if there's been trauma.
Yeah.
You don't know if there's been, some sort of upbringing that has made her feel a certain way about her body, circling all the way back to what you were saying at the beginning, and so many other things. And so I've realized actually talking to women about what I'm doing oftentimes is a little more delicate.
Because it's triggering.
And it's very powerful.
Yeah.
But yes, it's triggering, which men are completely disassociated from, of course.
Right.
So
Right.
it's just really interesting. And what I've also noticed is sometimes the women who resist the most for any of those reasons are the ones who once they find their way into the conversation, have the most have the most passion for what we're doing afterwards. You know,
that's so cool. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because then it really is an awakening. Because you don't always want to have to preach within your bubble. You know, you don't want to have to be just with the ones who already get it, right? Ideally, anytime we're having a controversial conversation, we want to invite those who are not comfortable with it, who may have opposing views, and say, all right, let's find a common ground that we can agree on, and then start from there and build upon it, right? So ideally, none of us want to jump on a trampoline and pee after we have babies, after we, you know, if there's a way that we can come from just a basic biological need, we can start to open up the more
Exactly.
sacred and all the other variables regarding that, which are a lot.
Yeah, I think it's really neat, and it's also interesting just to note, like I said, I've been doing this for a few years now, even the difference in how I present what I'm doing, and that's partially, of course, my comfort level as I keep learning more and more about this and get more and more passionate about how we have to normalize these conversations, and women's health is so important, and it is just bonkers to me that so many aspects of women's health are ignored. Crazy things like, do you know that almost every drug is only tested on men? Because if you use a woman, you don't know where she's in her hormonal cycle and her menstrual cycle, and maybe she'll have a different response, and that's just too messy and difficult. So we're not going to go that direction. Let's just have nice, stable men who will always be consistent, and like we can, you know, so much of our healthcare
is a mystery.
Is built for men.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's ridiculous, and obviously not serving half the population. And by the way, not just not serving the half the population, but not serving the half of the population that cares for the future generation, that cares for, that provides all the, let's be honest, like the emotional and cultural support for the people for whom the health system is working, you know? So I think it's really important. I think the good thing is a lot of these things are coming to light now. And there's a lot of women, especially out there, trying to find ways to address women's issues specifically, and I do hope it shifts. But, you know, whether it's sexual health that everyone's shying away from, or, I don't know, maternal health, aging health, all of these things, like, you know, it's creaking along, but it's
creaking along. But it does start also as mothers, right? With the way that we, as parents, let's say, the conversations we have around sex at an early age, right? The ways that women or young girls are introduced to the idea of their body, and how educated they are about their own sexuality, how much the mother, to some degrees, feels comfortable with her own, is very much
passed
on. Yeah. And so how, first of all, the healing has to start with us, right? That we can feel comfortable enough about having that conversation, and then making it not the shameful, embarrassing one-time conversation. We talk about sex that one time and then good luck with that. That this is a dialogue, that this is an ongoing dialogue as parents, to introduce our children to sexuality. That the idea that they're just going to get a sex ed class at school and that's going to give them everything they need, and that we don't have to have that uncomfortable conversation, is the way of the past and has to be shifted.
It is shifting, and what I love, my children are still younger, but when I talk to parents like you and other friends of mine who have children who are a bit older, I'm so in awe of how they are teaching their children, and it's really, I think, like how different my life would be if I was growing up with that kind of information, with the boys in my world having that kind of information. And it's just, it's really exciting, and I'm so glad it's happening, and I hope it continues to normalize. But yeah, I mean, it reminds me of a story. When I was first starting a few years ago, you know, everyone, when you do a product like I'm doing, like, oh, you should go on Shark Tank, right? So I remember, it was too early. I'll start that caveat. Like, you know, Shark Tank, I think you actually have to have a product or whatever it might be when you go on. But anyway, I reached out and I was in touch with one of the executive producers, and I explained what I was doing. And I was still very, like, I feel like I've learned how to speak publicly about what I'm doing now, meaning I can be very straight about what I'm talking about, but I've learned how to do it in a way that maybe doesn't shock in the same way I used to. Yeah. Because I was just a little clumsier about it. Sure. For better or worse, by the way. I think it's perfectly
learning
fine.
Curve.
Yeah. And also, I don't think it was wrong. It was just, I was just being honest in the way I knew to be honest at the time. Anyway, so I shared what I was doing, And I actually did focus a lot, for whatever reason. I think I was trying to break the ice by having a little fun and humor with it. And so, of course, that involves a little bit of the sexuality side of pelvic health. Anyway, and the guy wrote back and said, yes, you know, my wife just had a baby. I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm so glad you're doing this. It's such an important thing. I'm a little concerned about putting this on Shark Tank because most of our viewers, we have a lot of teenagers, and so on, who watch the show. He might have said children too, but I don't think so. I think he's talking specifically about teenagers.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, and?
That's a bad thing.
And I didn't understand, because even though I was joking with him, it was clear that when I presented it, I was talking about a pelvic health product. I didn't even say the word vagina, by the way. I mean, clear up the name of the product is the VaGenie.
It's implicit, yeah.
But, and I remember thinking, this is interesting. That being said, I don't think they would respond to me that way now. I do think there's been change in the last few years, which is nice.
Positive, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm speculating, but I just feel like they wouldn't have the same, not that there isn't a huge swath of the country that might still, have reservations about the kind of thing I'm doing and the way I talk about it. But for the most part, I think there's an easier path now to be able to have bigger conversations about this, both with adult women and with teenagers.
Yeah,
for that matter.
Yeah. I want to touch on something that I heard you speak about in an interview, talking about being a mother and stigmas around being in entrepreneurial roles. It would also being a CEO of your own company. That you had talked about a story with a CEO acknowledging how great your product was, acknowledging that they'd potentially like to invest, but then perhaps saying that we would bring on a different CEO. Can you speak about that?
Yeah,
it really touched on this idea of there's ageism, there's sexism, and there is motherism. There really is such a thing as motherism, that we kind of have this stigma that women as mothers can't do their jobs.
It's so true, and it was one of those really shocking moments.
Can you say exactly what he said to you?
Yeah. So I was meeting with this guy who was a well-known entrepreneur and someone who was an investor, and he could have helped. And I told him what I was doing, and like he said, he was very into it. And when we were in the parking lot, saying goodbye, and I thought we'd had this great meeting, and I was like, oh, this guy's gonna be so helpful and wonderful, and maybe he should be an advisor. I was thinking of all those things. And as he's walking away, he goes, well, of course, as soon as we get you money, we'll have to get a different CEO. And I said, well, oh, what? And I was thinking, oh, am I not qualified? I couldn't understand what he was saying. And he said, well, of course, because you're a mother, And I'm like, wait. And he's walking away, and I was still, it was, I couldn't catch up quick enough. And I was thinking, wait, what?
Still recovering from the...
Yeah, recovering from, because of course, the next thing is no one says that to a guy, a father.
Right.
No one says to a father, oh, well, you've got children. I don't know if you're going to be able to run this company. And it's so interesting. I just saw a headline today, interestingly enough, that said, being a mother is the equivalent of holding down 2.5 full-time jobs.
Sure.
So it's not like we're not used to doing a gazillion things at once. And we get very efficient.
And if anything, if you want something done, give it to someone who's really busy, right? I mean, and there's nobody 100%. I know busier than moms.
Yeah.
So we do,
because when we have that free time, we do it, and
Mm-hmm.
there's no dilly-dallying, there's no checking your social media, you're just on there and getting it done. Yeah, so that unfortunately is very common, and is still pretty prevalent, I think, in the tech world and business world. And there's a lot of biases. I mean, there's things like, I don't know if I was sharing this with you earlier, but of all the venture capital funding, it was originally 2%, but this year it went up to 2.9% goes to female-founded companies.
2.9%
of all the venture
overall.
Overall.
Wow.
Isn't that bonkerinsky's?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's interesting, and you're constantly working against that. But what can you do? You just got to keep on trucking.
Keep on trucking. What's exciting to me too about what we're more aware of in the collective, things like yoni eggs, for example. Like most people kind of know what a yoni egg, and if you don't, so things that strengthen the pelvic floor, things that start to talk about the inner space of the vagina is starting to be talked about a lot more. And isn't that interesting, right? Like the idea of for the G-spot, still, first of all, named after a man, right?
Oh my gosh, all the Kegels, by the way. I had an advisor.
Isn't it ironic?
Yeah, that is all named after a man. She was so great. We were going to write a book together, and she was like, we cannot call it Kegels. We have to come up with a new word. So we came up with the pelvic wave. But
ooh, I like that.
In progress.
Hashtag pelvic wave.
Hashtag pelvic wave.
but also that they're like the G-spot might not exist.
Yeah,
It's still this mythology that we still have so much mystery and confusion and fear ultimately about the yoni, right? That yonic energy that is going to suck you back in. That there is like this mythical, subconscious undercurrent about the feminine that is so important to dissect and so important to get into. And I'm so excited about a product like yours that is delving into that arena in a very practical way. It's very tangible. It's the results are very obvious, but you're going into a space that was very uncomfortable, right? But it's subconscious. It's a collective subconscious that you're getting into too.
I love so much what you're saying, but yes, we're going into a space that is dark and unknown. And I think it's interesting, even when you bring up the yoni, how much controversy there was around some of those conversations. Remember, it's like everyone got all up in arms, but at least we're talking about it. And I agree. I think, look, we're coming at it from a practical health and fitness sort of angle, but of course, I mean, it's so clear that energetically it's about something so much bigger. And I do think it's interesting, when you're speaking about all the things we don't know about our sexuality, another thing I didn't know, and I found this so interesting, is that apparently, and I'd love you to dive into this if you have anything to say about it more, but in the tantric chakras, is there such a thing or something like that, but that the cervix is the heart center. And so, on a male, it's the, I don't know what's called, the glands, the tip of his penis is his heart center. So when you make love with a man, when a man and woman make love, their two heart centers touch, which I think is so beautiful.
That is beautiful.
And even just being aware of things like that, I think it made me even more love, for this part of my body. And then I had a friend challenge me to look at my cervix.
Okay.
Because this is one step beyond looking at your vulva. Yeah, you can get a speculum on Amazon, and I mean, we're all challenged to look at our vulva, right? And to, I think, look at it until we get past that point of discomfort, so we can appreciate it for what it is and for how beautiful it is and for its power. And it's interesting. I still have not looked at my cervix. I haven't done it yet.
Okay, well, to do bucket list, right?
Isn't that
this year, 2020.
It's just
new decade.
Because that is, I mean, talk about dark and unknown. I mean, there's really only your doctor really who will see it.
I feel like I have seen mine because in an examination, like I was shown it.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting.
But to your point about the power, I think that's the biggest thing that we're talking about here at the end of the day. That there is nothing more powerful than our creative essence. The core of our creativity, the core of all life on this planet comes through the womb of a mother. And because of that, we have, unfortunately, in the patriarchy that we live in, so much suppression around that, so much control of that by the patriarchy, right? That women's bodies need to be controlled, that they are to be feared, that they need to be tamped down, they need to be either denied or pornographied, right? Yeah. And that's what we're looking at right now. That we have either this suppression and shame, or we have spread eagle being, exploited. And the most essential thing I feel right now is the importance of finding the sacred that is the essence of what the feminine is, and helping young girls understand that, and giving like-minded women room to invite women who might be more resistant to it space to come into the conversation and start to honor that and start to open up. Like, let's explore, let's be brave enough to get out of the darkness of shame.
Well, I think that's why it's so great you're doing this podcast, quite frankly. And I think it's true. I think, every day I hear of more and more women who are having some version of this conversation through their business, through their messaging, through their whatever platform they're using. And I think it's only growing. I think that at the same time, it only highlights even more the energy of suppression that's also still out there, and working hard, because I agree with you.
Because you mean the pendulum effect.
The pendulum effect.
Yeah.
I just really am looking forward to, as you say, if we stay in it authentically, one can't help but have a positive outcome. And I think we all sort of anchor ourselves to that belief and just continue to be curious about ourselves, about being good to ourselves, and that means respecting ourselves, going on a journey to know and understand ourselves, whether that's, again, emotionally, spiritually, or physically. I think all three are so important. To give yourself space, to forgive yourself if you think that you've been judging yourself. There's so much judgment. We judge ourselves all the time, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And it's a lifelong journey, perhaps, for most of us. But it's a great journey, and it's exciting every time you discover something new. Even if that's just looking at your vulva and saying, "Oh, hey, look here, looky there." Yeah.
Well, and amen to to all of that, but and so important to have the sisters that we can connect with and have the conscious conversations and propel each other forward in that. So thank you so much. I love you so much, and I'm so honored that you are my dear friend and that you are leading the way in this very important new revolution. So how can they learn more about VaGenie, or how would you encourage people to go on and find out more?
Come and be part of our community. You can go to our website, which is vagenie.co, just co, no com. Or if we still have a really lovely also Facebook group called Free the V. You can find us on there. So it's FREETHEV on Facebook, and there's a great group of women on there, and that's where we just talk about it. It's not specifically pelvic health, it's really any woman's issue, and it's fun. So yeah, come find us there, and hopefully we'll be available to you soon as a product as well.
Can't
we
wait
will
for
keep
that.
knocking on doors till we get the funding to do that. But in the meantime, I also want to thank you so much for having me on here, and I love talking to you, and I'm so excited about what you're doing, and I know it's going to make a great impact to everyone who's listening, because when we listen in the safety of our own homes, we can allow things to really settle in a deeper way.
Such a good point. Julia Rose, thank you so much.